The desert wind howled through the wire, carrying the heat of an Arizona afternoon. But the man sitting in the back of the transport truck was shivering. He kept his head down, staring at the dusty floorboards, trying to make himself invisible. He was a German sailor, a prisoner of war. But to the men waiting inside that camp, he was something far worse. The truck ground to a halt. The tailgate slammed down. Werner Drechsler stepped out into the blinding sun of Papago Park. He looked at the faces pressed against the chain-link fence. Hundreds of them. Hard men. U-boat crews. Hardened veterans of the German Navy. Drechsler felt his stomach turn to ice. He knew these men. More importantly, they knew him. The American guards had no idea what they had just done. They thought they were just transferring a prisoner. In reality, they had just thrown a sheep into a pit of wolves. And the gate was already locked. This is the story of a fatal bureaucratic error. A story of espionage, betrayal, and a brutal execution on American soil. If you appreciate uncovering these lost dark chapters of World War II, please take a second to subscribe. It helps us keep digging. It was March 12, 1944. The location was prisoner of war camp, Papago Park, Arizona. It sat in the middle of the desert, surrounded by red rocks and saguaro cacti. It looked like nowhere, but it held some of the most dangerous men of the Third Reich. The camp was filled with submarine crews. These were men who had survived depth charges and freezing Atlantic waters. They remained fiercely loyal to their commanders and their ideology. They had a code. You fight. You survive. You never talk. Werner Drechsler had broken that code. For months, he had been at a secret facility called P.O. Box 1142. It was a hidden interrogation center near Washington, D.C. There, the Office of Naval Intelligence had made him an offer. A comfortable life. Good food. Safety. All he had to do was talk. And he did more than talk. He worked for them. He posed as a regular prisoner, bunking with newly captured U-boat captains, extracting their secrets, and handing them over to the Americans. He had become an informant. In the eyes of his comrades, a traitor. Now, due to a paperwork mix-up, the Navy had sent him back to the general population. Back to the very men whose secrets he had stolen. Drechsler walked toward Barracks 4. He tried to walk like a regular sailor. He tried to hide the fear in his eyes. The wooden floorboards creaked as he entered the long room. It smelled of sweat, cheap tobacco, and desert dust. Bunks lined the walls. Men sat in groups, playing cards, mending shirts, whispering. The conversation stopped. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. Drechsler found an empty bunk and threw his kit bag down. He felt the gaze of dozens of men on his back. It felt like physical weight. A shadow fell over him. He looked up. A man was standing there, a petty officer from a U-boat crew. His face was hard, etched with the memory of the Atlantic. "You look familiar," the man said. "I don't think so," Drechsler replied. His voice was tight. "I was on U-118. "I know," the man said. "I also saw you in Virginia, at the secret place. You were the one asking all the questions." The silence in the barracks grew heavy. It was the kind of silence that comes before something irreversible. Drechsler turned away, pretending to arrange his pillow. He could hear his own heart hammering against his ribs. He knew the rumors had traveled faster than the transport truck. The Germans had their own communication network. They knew a stool pigeon was coming. That night, Drechsler lay awake. He stared at the wooden rafters. Every sound made him jump. A cough, a shifting mattress, the distant howl of a coyote. He recalled his own words to the American intelligence officers weeks ago. He had begged them not to send him back. "I cannot go there," he had told them. "They know me. They will kill me." The Americans hadn't listened. They thought the war was over for these men. They thought prisoners were safe behind the wire. They didn't understand the internal war that was still raging. The next morning, the atmosphere was suffocating. The camp was run by the prisoners themselves internally. The ranking German officers held the real power, not the American guards. And the order had already been given. An illegal tribunal was convened in hushed whispers. Evidence was gathered. Witnesses from the secret interrogation center confirmed his identity. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty of treason. Sentence: death. Drechsler tried to stay close to the guards during the day. He tried to blend in, but there was nowhere to hide. The camp was a fishbowl. Evening came. March 12th turned into the darkness of the desert night. The lights in the barracks went out. Drechsler lay in his bunk, fully clothed. He was waiting. Around midnight, the noise began. It wasn't loud. It was the sound of coordinated movement. Shadows detached themselves from the walls. 7 men. They moved with discipline and intent. They surrounded his bunk. "Get up," a voice whispered. "Please," Drechsler said. "I didn't do it." "Get up." They dragged him out of the bed. He tried to shout, but a hand clamped over his mouth. He was hauled across the floor, his heels scraping against the wood. The other prisoners in the barracks stayed in their bunks. They turned their faces to the wall. They saw nothing. They heard nothing. This was justice, according to their law. They dragged him into the shower room. The tiles were cold. The air was damp. The group circled him. There was no chaotic beating at first. It was methodical. They wanted him to know why this was happening. "You sold us," one of them hissed. "For what? Extra cigarettes? A soft bed?" "I had no choice," Drechsler gasped. "We all had a choice," the man replied. "You chose the enemy." The sentence was carried out quickly and without witnesses. No one intervened. No one called for the guards. When it was over, the 7 men left the room in silence. They left him there. A warning to anyone else who thought about collaborating. His body was discovered in the shower room the next morning. The camp exploded into chaos. The Americans were furious. This wasn't just a murder. It was a brazen act of defiance right under their noses. The investigation was immediate and intense. The code of silence held for a while, but the sheer pressure of the interrogation broke it. The investigators found the 7 men. Friedrich Guggenberger, a U-boat ace and senior figure in the camp, was investigated but never formally charged. The 7 men who did the deed, however, were identified. They were Helmut Fischer, Fritz Franke, Günther Külsen, Heinrich Ludwig, Bernhard Ryak, Otto Stengel, and Rolf Witzui. They didn't deny it. They didn't beg for mercy. In their eyes, they hadn't committed a crime. They believed they had carried out a lawful sentence against a traitor. At their trial, they stood tall. They argued that Drechsler's betrayal had endangered their families back in Germany. They argued that under German military law, his death was required. The American tribunal didn't see it that way. This was murder on U.S. soil. All 7 were sentenced to death. On August 25, 1945, the war in Europe was already over. But at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, the war claimed its final victims from this story. The 7 U-boat men were led to the gallows. It became one of the most significant executions of enemy prisoners carried out by the United States during World War II. According to the official records, they marched to their deaths without fear. They wore their German uniforms, stripped of insignia. They didn't ask for forgiveness. Bernhard Rehak, one of the men, wrote a final letter. "I die for my country and my comrades. What I did was necessary." The U.S. government kept the details of the traitor Drechsler quiet for years. The existence of the secret interrogation center at P.O. Box 1142 remained classified until the early 2000s. The military didn't want to admit that their own intelligence operation had inadvertently led to a man's brutal death. Werner Drechsler wanted to survive the war. He thought cooperation was his ticket out. Instead, it became his death warrant. War creates heroes, but it also creates shadows. And sometimes, the most dangerous place isn't the battlefield. It's the quiet barracks where the enemy sleeps right next to you.